Good morning, everybody. We are joined today with Oracle Tim from Tim from Oracle Investments on Twitter at OracleTim1, and the amazing James Stephenson at I_cannot_enough. Good morning to you both. How are you today?
Doing wonderful.
Good morning.
So we are going to go ahead and talk about production numbers, predicting the future, and all that good stuff. Why don't we start with how the numbers went? Tim did a good job. He missed by only 1%. James, you missed by quite a big number this time. I think you missed by like 31 cars.
Yeah, I did. On production, I missed by 31. Yeah.
31 units.
I will never get that close to for sure. That's a whole lot of luck, is what that is. If I claim to be, if I take credit for skill when I get that close, I have to take credit for incompetence when I miss by a lot, which is coming. So, whenever you forecast, it will be wrong. That's the first rule of forecasting. But this time I was wrong by 31 units on production. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, I've seen people trying to do the numbers for startups and miss by more than 31. James missed by significantly less than the entire EV production of General Motors from Q4.
They did sell 26 units.
Yeah. That's true. So, yeah. That was very exciting.
I have some work to do next time. Next quarter, I'll be closer. No, I will not.
So, how do you do it? What's the strategy? Oh, and by the way, I also did terrible. I missed by 1.29%.
Not too bad.
Not too bad. But I think, honestly, part of it is we follow this more closely than the analysts do.
Yeah, for sure.
So, let's start with you, Tim. What's your method? How do you do it? Where's the magic come from?
It's really not all that much magic. I mean, just listen to what Tesla tells us. I mean, Elon has given us their predictions, and Tesla gives us information along the way, like when Berlin says, hey, we've hit 2,000 vehicles per week, and I just take that. So I know how many days of operation each factory is going to be up and running for a month, and I break down the numbers that we currently have and kind of project out what growth they're looking for. So Berlin's saying that they're looking to do 5,000 vehicles a week by the end of the year. I just base my growth off of that over the course of the month per day, and then just run some numbers on that, multiply it out. Pretty darn simple.
James, please share the wisdom.
I can't. I wish I could describe my model as pretty darn simple. I can't. I have maybe the most detailed and complex model anybody has on Tesla. It's so complicated. When I tweet out my forecast, it's a 30-tweet thread, and then I made a video series that I tweeted out one video per day in September. So I had a 29-part video series on how I make my forecast and talking about the forecast charts that I make, that sort of thing. So yeah, the production and the deliveries forecast is by model and by production site, and it's by number of production weeks times the design capacity for that model at that site, times the production efficiency that I expect that model and site to have during those operating weeks, and that gives me production. And then I have to forecast days of sales in ending inventory, and everybody guessed too low on that one, but that's how you get your ending inventory. And if you know your production and your ending inventory, that gives you deliveries. So you add all those up, and there's your deliveries forecast.
So that works great. I'm actually surprised that you got 15 hours of your YouTube videos crunched down into about 2 minutes there. And I think that's great. And so I guess now no one needs to watch any videos.
No, you can skip all those videos. That was it.
Yeah,
there's nothing else in the model, just what I said. Yeah.
It's just the greatest hits. That's what we're here to play.
This is Cliff Notes.
That's right. So we could, so I wanted to look at a couple of tweets of yours, James. Let's see here. I'm looking at one from Matthias Fons, Q3, production and delivery analyst estimates. Piper Sandler was the closest with a 3% miss.
On delivery.
On the deliveries, yeah. And not many of them listed production. Gary Black got close on production. 0.25%, not bad. And and some others missed pretty badly. One comment we got was that a lot of the analysts follow more than one manufacturer. That, I think, is a fair point. And now I'm looking at this tweet from you, James. Tesla deliveries trailing 12-month totals, where we can see that, yeah, it's growing pretty good. Do you have any thoughts on what this chart's going to look like moving into the future?
Yeah, it's going to keep doing that, right? It's going to keep going up and to the right. That's what's going on with Tesla. They are expanding their global production capacity as fast as they can. You know that. You're making the most informative videos there are on YouTube, I think, on how Tesla's building out their production infrastructure for global production capacity, and that's just going to keep happening into the future. So, yeah, I expect Tesla to keep selling more and more cars every year than they did the year before, as we've seen.
And then, and Tim, I assume you think this is a busted growth story?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, we're definitely not going anywhere except for a way up. I mean, thinking about the fact that, production, and this is the reason why I track mostly production, is there is just so much demand. The lead times are insane right now. So despite the fact that we have a delayed demand, it's not a demand issue. It's just demand was delayed a little bit and deliveries are getting delayed to the next quarter. It's just falling into one bucket rather than another. So production to me right now is we cannot produce enough. We're still in a situation where we can't produce enough vehicles to meet the demand. And until that somehow ends, I cannot foresee us not going up to the right.
And then we've got the next chart here. Let's see. Another James Stephenson one here. We're looking at, this one is U.S. light vehicle sales 2022 versus 2015 based on annualized sales. And it looks like Toyota's gone down a bit. It looks like General Motors gone down a bit. The only non-gone down ones is Volvo, which went from a car to 2 cars, Hyundai, which went up just a hair, and this little company out of California called Tesla. Maybe you've heard of them.
Yeah, it's up. It's up a little bit. Yeah, if you look across that chart left to right, you got 14 companies there. You got 7 that were producing at pretty high volume and 7 that were producing at pretty low volume. Among those high-volume producers, like none of them did very much better. Hyundai, Kia did a little bit better, right? And the rest of them were all down big. So the ones that were producing more than 2 million cars in 2015 are mostly producing less than 2 million cars now.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, as a Tesla fan and a Tesla investor, I could say that some of the shift where we see Tesla taking market share from other automakers is coming from the Tesla stretch, which is something that I did and lots of other people did when purchasing my Tesla, which is buy a luxury car. I was never going to buy a luxury car until Tesla came around, right? That is not for me. I was never going to go buy a Mercedes or a BMW, but because I believed in the value proposition of Tesla, that a Tesla would be worth the money, I saved up for one for a long time, right? So I think we got a lot of people out there who were still driving the cars that they bought in 2015, maybe, and making payments to themselves into a savings account to save up for Tesla. So that's part of it. Another part of it is that GM, and Ford have been cutting passenger cars. So there are several models of car that both of those automakers no longer make. They weren't making enough profit off of them, and they discontinued those models. There's a pretty long list of models they don't make anymore, because they're so much happier with the margins they make selling pickups and SUVs.
And that's the thing, is the entire market's gotten smaller. And they love to blame the chip shortage or part shortage, or in Ford's case, the emblem shortage, which is unfortunate because as I figure it, that is the most reliable part of the car. Why?
Hardly ever breaks.
And And I'm in the same boat too. Like I have my car right now. It's a 2016 CRV. I wanted to get a Honda because when I was growing up, my parents loved Honda. Great vehicle. And so I finally got one. It was the first purchase I made. But now I'm here sitting the same thing, and I'm usually like, it's the most base model. I have bullet holes in the back of it, but Tesla still wants to give me $7,000 for it. Thank you, Tesla. And but for me, it's like the same value proposition is I can save so much. I'm very frugal with my money. So for me to spend $60,000 on a vehicle, you better be sure that that thing is going to be worth the value I'm going to put into it. And thinking about all the cost savings I'm going to have over the next decade, lack of headaches that I'm going to have to deal with, that to me was enough to get me into this vehicle and make me want to go and get it. And then I finally got to drive one, and I was like, oh, and it's also awesome. So,
hold on, Tim. Are you going to bury the lead and not address the bullet holes in the back of your car story? We need to hear that one.
So the irony behind all of that was my brother had a 20s themed wedding on New Year's Eve. And so we're at the wedding, and everybody's getting text messages. They're like, are you guys okay? And we're like, what do you mean we're okay? We're at a wedding. Of course we're okay. And apparently at the hotel that we were staying at right next door, there was a shooting. So we went over there to check it all out. My brother-in-law looks around. This huge group of kids, and there were like 4 of them that were causing trouble. One of them was mad at another one. The guy was running out the back door, shooting at him. He goes, all ends, we enjoy the wedding. Next morning I wake up to go out to my car, and there's bullet holes in my car. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. 20s themed Reddit wedding, and I get shot up at it, so that's great.
That is great. That makes it great.
And insurance was going to cover it, but I'm like, no, I'll take the money for an oil change and some updates on this thing, and we'll go from there, and I'll keep that as street cred.
Did you go in costume as a 20s era prohibition gangster? Because that's really just adding to the theming.
It wasn't a gangster, but it was definitely 20s themed tuxes that we were wearing. Oh, yeah.
All right.
That seems pretty fun. So why is it? So I would agree. Ford and GM have definitely gotten rid of a lot of the cars that I thought of as their marquees. Why is that a bad strategy, James? Would you have advised them to do that or not?
Well, I mean, I would have advised them to transition to electric vehicles a long time ago. They kept announcing that they were going to, and they kept not doing it, right? The first generation EV you make isn't going to be that great. So you should make it sooner rather than later and get that out of the way so you increase your competitive position on future generations of electric vehicles. Move faster, not slower, into a disruption, because there's plenty of evidence out there of other disruptions that have come and gone and wiped out former market leaders in their wake. So if you don't want to get left in the dustbin of history, you need to keep current with the times and provide the market with what it wants. And the market is telling us pretty clearly they want electric vehicles going forward, and automakers who don't keep up with that demand are going to find themselves in a world of hurt.
What about you, Tim?
Yeah, I look at, the biggest argument, of course, we're hearing from everybody is competition, GM, look at how many models they've got coming, and it's like, but if they're already in a position right now where they're cutting down on how many models they have because they're not profitable, why is it that creating so many more models would be good for them in the future? Like, they're contradicting themselves. Ford proved it. They're the only ones who haven't gone bankrupt other than Tesla. And they did it because they had trimmed down their model line. They found what their meat and potatoes are, and they stuck with it. And they have been, as far as legacy auto goes, one of the first movers to actually start pushing things. So it's probably one of the reasons why they're going to succeed the best out of legacy auto, out of everybody. But like James said, you've got to jump into it. And I've seen, many of us have seen it, for the last 5 years. We're transitioning to EVs. And now we're getting that strong push, and we're at the no point of no return right now. We're going into EVs, and if you're not going to be a player in that game, you're not going to be in the game at all.
What happened to sedans and compacts and hatchbacks?
Well, I mean, we've got the sedans with the Model 3, but
I mean the legacy guys. I mean cars in general. Are those just imports now?
Oh yeah, they're just Matchbox cars that they have made overseas.
James?
They've been ceding the market to others. They've been saying, hey, we're going to focus on what we do best and what we think is going to be the best for our business and for our P&L. And that's to try to make as much money per vehicle as we can. So it's hard to compete with Toyota and Honda for small passenger cars. So if you're Ford or GM and you're making, I don't know, Escorts, Cadillacs, there's a lot of competition in that market as well. So,
when I was in college,
sells okay in China. Then.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I've ridden in a Buick in China. It was the executive car that they picked me up in.
Yeah, they love Buick in China a lot more than they do in the U.S. outside of, Texas. Really old people in Texas still buy Buicks. But apart from that, I'm not sure there's a lot of young people in line to buy a Buick these days.
So in college, I would go to this subpar eatery called Taco Bell. And they weren't great, so they had to do things a little different. They went on a price advantage, and they went on a 24-hour advantage. The advantage of 24 hours is you've got, only 1, 2, maybe 3 options. That gives you some big chunk of the market. But also it puts it in your head. And then as I got older, they stopped doing 24-hour. And, it'd be the one time a year you're out at 3 a.m., you swing by and it's closed, no Taco Bell. And then it's out of my head for the remainder of the year. I don't go there anymore. And then they ceded their price advantage. What I'm asking is Ford Taco Bell?
I don't know. I mean, it gives me the runs. So, when I look at it too, I don't know. So when it comes down to when it comes down to profitability on these vehicles, I've got to look at, legacy auto and the industry I'm in construction retail. And I've been in retail long enough between my company now and Home Depot, where I've noticed that in order for a lot of companies, there's only so many costs you can cut. When it comes to legacy auto, when it comes to them making their ICE vehicles, they cut as many costs as they possibly can. EVs obviously have a long way to go when we can continue cutting costs to bring price down. But when it comes to legacy auto and ICE vehicles, they can't. They can't do that. So they've got to find any way that they possibly can to trim costs somewhere in the company because it's not coming out of the vehicles, or they've got to raise prices a little bit. So they've hit that ceiling when it comes to cost cutting. And so they've got to do everything else they can. So like Taco Bell, hey, we're losing margins here. We need to cut costs. We're not doing 24 hours again. All these little things, and then they have to start going up on prices. To me, that just denotes when they finally hit the ceiling is because they've got to start doing little things like that to try and boost profits up.
And I would say that is a problem. Would you... I get it. It's no fun selling low-margin cars. Is it the Wall Street addiction to margins that's made them give up on selling 1 million of, the Focus or something affordable?
I wouldn't even say it's so much margins as much as actual profitability. It's the profit dollars coming in, and Toyotas and Hyundais, they can bring in larger profit amounts of dollars when it comes to the smaller vehicles than the Fords and the GMs because they don't sell the quantity needed to bring in the dollar amounts.
I did have another tweet of James's I wanted to look at. James said, "Hey, at Elon Musk." Who's that again? Oh, I remember. Any tips on how to increase U.S. sales year over year? Asking for a friend with a chart that shows the unfortunate year over year declines for all companies apart from one.
That's my favorite looking flag right there.
Yeah, it's an eye-opener for sure to see those numbers. And if you read the article that I'm linking to as the source, they don't do a good job characterizing what's going on in the data table. Like, the data table is in the article, but unless you take that data out and then visualize it, you don't get the story because they're not saying, hey, Tesla's up and everybody else is down in the body of the article. They're saying, hey, it's a tough year and we expect Q4 is going to be tough as well. That's not going to be tough for Tesla. Tesla's going to be up again by a lot in Q4. They're the only one up 47%. And, of course, the Tesla Q takeaway from that is Tesla fails to achieve 50% growth.
Yes, and their argument is, well, the price is already baked into the stock price because of the fact that, they're supposed to be at 50% and they're not going to be there. And I don't know. I'm looking at what Tesla's goals are. James, I'll actually ask you, do you think that when they came out with that insider information about hitting 495,000 threes and Ys produced for Q4, do you think that's possible?
No, I don't think Tesla can sell 500,000 in Q4. I think what got reported is somebody's misunderstanding of probably a goal from earlier in the year. So maybe early in the year they had said, hey, we need this many deliveries for the year to achieve 50% growth. I think Tesla will achieve something close-ish to 50% growth. So maybe a little better than 45% for the full year, but I would be floored if Tesla delivers 500,000 in Q4. That seems like more than a reasonable investor ought to expect based on production and the wave ending.
Yeah, and looking back at the past, I think right now, numbers-wise, I think it's 463,000 vehicles they need to deliver or to produce in order to hit 50,000 year-over-year growth. And looking historically, every Q4 that they have made has matched 2 years prior for an entire year. So, for instance, this year would be 497,000 vehicles produced to equal 2020's entire amount. And that's how their exponential growth has gone historically from what I have seen. So, but again, we didn't have the same headwinds that we're facing right now. But even if they come up with that 450 to 475, I'm going to be more than thrilled.
Yeah, Mark B. Spiegel posted an article in 2014 saying that Tesla's goal of selling 500,000 cars in 2020 was absurd. And then in 2020, Tesla sold 499,650.
Yeah, they missed by 50. He was right. They missed. They didn't.
Yeah, they missed.
They missed by 350.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. Mark B. Spiegel, how does he still have two nickels to rub together?
He shares them with Gordon Johnson.
They've got a nickel sharing app. That's great. You're going to be on Shark Tank. So I've seen concerns that the inventory might be getting too low in certain markets, that the wait time is below 2 weeks in a lot of places. Is this a concern?
Well, if you follow Troy Teslake, and you should follow Troy Teslake, I'm a patron of his on Patreon, and if you're very interested in this topic, I think it's worth your money and time to read what he publishes there. Without divulging anything that's supposed to be a Patreon exclusive piece of information, what we saw at the end of the quarter was what we often see at the end of the quarter, where the wait times come down a lot. So yeah, it was down to 1 week in China at the end of September. We've seen that go back up to 1 to 4 weeks for some products and 5 to 8 weeks for others. So they are exporting from China. But it's less backlog now than it was before. So Tesla has been working through the backlog of orders in China. There's still a pretty sizable backlog in the US and in Europe that Tesla needs to work through. That'll take, a quarter to satisfy. So when the backlog is building, Tesla takes criticism for not being able to produce enough to satisfy demand. And when the backlog is falling, then the cries are renewed of the growth story is over, the demand cliff is coming, Tesla is a zero, etc.
Yeah, and I know. I know in Australia, they're looking at, for the Model Y performance, 26 to 34 week lead times. And I know the market there isn't as big as here, but, when people are talking about that, I'm like, well, all these vehicles, they started exporting earlier in September than they normally do. And so to hit all the Asia-Pacific countries that now can take Model Ys, because they didn't have them last year at this time. So now have so many more countries they can export to. So starting it earlier, and as Elon said, it's going to smooth it out and make it easier to track going forward. So just because, it's a demand shift from country to country, there's demand everywhere. And I know, talking to Lee from Tesla Economist, he's been waiting in New Zealand for a long time, and he was one of the first ones on. And, he still hasn't gotten his Model Y yet.
I remembered what else I wanted to say about China, which is that at the end of September, there were some holdouts who had ordered a Model Y standard range. And a rumor went around in China which may be true, we don't know yet, that Tesla is going to reduce the price of the Model Y SR in China for Chinese buyers, not for exports, by about $7,000 US, down to about $42,000 base, so that people who order the base Model Y SR would be able to qualify for a new government incentive in China that's starting in Q4. So if that rumor turns out to be true, and if those buyers were, or those people who had ordered that vehicle take delivery in, let's say, November and December at the new price, then what you'll see is volume increase in China and a rate decrease. So, maybe billion and a half dollars less per year than what Tesla could have made if they had stayed at that higher price for the Model Y SR. But for the exports and for the other variants, the other option configs of Model Y, you would still have the higher price point, I think.
Yeah, and I did hear that China extended their version of the EV tax credit through 2023 as well. So anybody who was trying to rush at the end of the year now has more time, so they're not going to try and rush to get those deliveries. So that'll just smooth and extend that out as well.
In Shanghai,
and discontinued the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that qualified for the free license tags. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
No, that I think we're all eager to jump on that, because that is a big deal. If you've ever been to Shanghai, it is congested, as any city of that size would be. So I'm concerned about people in Q4 waiting until Q1 to take delivery in order to realize an EV credit. What are we thinking there?
I'm doing it myself. $7,500 is $7,500. I can put that right in a Tesla stock. So why would I not want to do that? And my delivery date right now, my window is November 3rd to December 8th. So I've pushed it off from March. I switched things around a little bit, so I ended up getting put back to the end of the line. I am curious. I've been hearing some rumors from people that Tesla's only allowing people to push off a certain amount of time. I don't know how true that is, but as soon as I find out, I'll let you guys know as well, because I do intend on pushing it off to January, because I do want to get that EV tax credit.
James, what are you thinking on that?
There's one dynamic in play here that I think is possibly important, which is that Tesla has been raising prices pretty steadily over the past year. And some of the people who are in the queue to take delivery in Q4 placed their orders when the prices were a lot lower. So if Tesla tells them, hey, you can't defer your order, you need to take it in Q4. If you don't, it's to the back of the line for you, and you'll need to order at today's prices. Then they'll say, screw it, not worth the benefit, not worth the EV credit. I'll just take my Tesla that I've been waiting for now. And you won't have that difficulty. But, if it's a worst case scenario and you have a lot of people not take delivery, then you have a whole lot of ending inventory, and it gets sold in Q1, right? So you got another one of these timing variances where some of the earnings that you thought were going to happen in Q4 are now going to happen in Q1.
Resulting in a lower stock and a buying opportunity. Yashu yesterday said that the incentive he got when he bought his was a year of free supercharging, which sounds amazing, and it's like $500.
And I know, because in China we know they've been doing all sorts of deals, get a Tesla insurance and you can get discounts. So I have no doubt they'll do some things like that to encourage it. And I don't know if either of you guys know, I haven't gotten clarification, do fleets like Hertz, do they qualify for the EV tax credit as well?
I don't know that.
Because the question there is, well, if there's going to be a lot of consumers like myself who are going to push it off, Tesla can just focus on all these fleet companies because because they're commercial, they cannot qualify for it. Then they could just start dumping all the deliveries on these fleets and take those out of the backlog as well.
Mm-hmm. I also don't know for sure, but I suspect you're right about that, Tim, that Hertz wouldn't be able to claim the credit. Don't hold me to it, but I bet you're right about that.
So Kairav Patel asked, could they deliver more to Canada near the end of the quarter?
Sure.
Yeah, that's true. And any exports that would come out of the U.S., because we know that China is the major export hub right now, But yeah, anything local, there's no reason that Tesla would ship from China to Canada. That would make no sense. And then who knows? I mean, obviously we wouldn't have a Canadian factory up and running yet. We'll hear about that by the end of the year. Wink, wink. But obviously that's not going to be up and running until probably 2024. But yeah, that would make sense to be able to ship there and even down into Mexico. Anywhere locally around here would make sense.
So since we've got the best in the world at predicting production, I've got a lot of questions in the chat. Semi-production, what's going on? What kind of numbers can we expect to see?
Well, I'm forecasting 8 produced and delivered in Q4. So whatever happens, I don't think I'm going to miss by more than about 100.
Very bullish.
Yes, we're going to go with GM-style production for the Semi in December. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And like I've heard people talking about, producing 100,000, 250,000 a year. I don't picture the Semi being that kind of production volume. It'll get up there eventually, maybe, but for the beginnings, it's going to be a slower ramp. Think about just the batteries required for it. That's a lot of batteries they got to pump out. So, I couldn't imagine, like James said. I think anything under 100 is probably close.
And I would agree. And we've got Tesla Herbert in the chat saying, just 8?
Just 8 in Q4, yeah, for sure. I've got that growing to 50 in Q1, about 100 in Q2, about 150 in Q3, about 300 in Q4 of next year. So I have very low expectations for how many Tesla semis are going to be made at the beginning of the ramp, because it's a completely different kind of vehicle than Tesla has made before, and because the market size for that kind of vehicle is a lot smaller than the passenger car market. I've seen overly optimistic assessments from people that Tesla will be selling 1 million semis per year, and take it to the bank. I am guaranteeing you right now, Tesla will never sell 1 million semis per year. That is way too many. The market just isn't big enough to have one supplier of semi-tractors take that much. The entire market in the U.S. is less than that. So, yeah, I've got low expectations, and then I hope that Tesla surpasses them.
John, yeah, and I know, just looking at the margins too, the margins we're probably going to see in the Semi are going to be probably close to dollar-wise the same as 5 or 6 Model Ys. So you don't need to sell as many semis to be able to equal the margins coming in from the regular vehicles. Plus, we've got the whole charging infrastructure for the Semi is not up and running fully like it needs to be yet anyway. So you don't want to saturate the market with vehicles that can't be charged, because that's going to be discouraging for anybody buying them. Yeah, and when Elon tweeted the other day, I think I misread it, because when he said, production, going into effect for the Semi and first deliveries on December 1st, for some reason my brain thought, well, production is going to be on December 1st and Pepsi is going to receive their first ones around that same time frame. Never even registered in my mind that maybe they're already producing the Semi now, and the first one's going to be rolling out to them on December 1st.
I think they already have it. I think they're going to do the paperwork on December 1st, because Pepsi has been testing the vehicles for a year. Tesla can sell the semis for any price. Lowering carbon footprint is more important to these companies than paying $500,000 per semi. So when the Semi was introduced, there were no EV credits for semis, and now there are some very generous ones. California has $185,000 per semi for a limited pool, I'm sure. New York has $120,000. The federal incentive is tens of thousands. Do you guys remember what that is?
40,000. 40,000 for the Semi.
40,000. So if you could get the federal and the New York, you could get a $200,000 rig, and it'd be free. So what do you think the price is going to be on the Semi?
I think didn't they say it was 160?
Oh yeah, but that was in the before times.
It was 180.
Oh,
yeah, it was 180 for the base, and it was 200.
No, it was 150 and 180.
Was it 150 and 180?
Yeah,
right?
But that was in the before times.
We got to take our prices way up.
way up. Not just because of all these very generous credits, but inflation, and I don't know if 150 and 180 were ever all that realistic.
It was $2017, so.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That was back when the heads were still small on the bills.
Yes.
Do you know?
And then of course, what's going to end up happening is and Pepsi's going to start it. But once these fleets start rolling out there, and these companies can start showing their cost savings when it comes to it, just like Hertz already shared with us, that's when they're really going to start seeing a backlog coming in for these semis, because these fuel costs are exorbitant right now. And so if these companies can say, hey, we're going to save ourselves, $50 million a year in fuel alone, yeah, we're going to go and switch over to this, and we're going to start seeing this order backlog coming in.
And do you think 300, 400, 500,000 is a reasonable price for the semi?
I mean,
sorry, Sam, go ahead.
No, especially if once they get FSD rolling into it, just like we saw in The Simpsons, because they predict everything. So once we see that rolling out, oh yeah, that'll totally be worth it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that the top two costs of running a trucking operation are labor and fuel for your driver, and for all that delicious diesel that needs to go in that huge tank. So those are enormous costs, and they're both addressed directly by the Tesla Semi once the platooning is legal on roads. You can just have one driver lead a few semis behind them on their route. So you just have the ones behind you follow the leader. And then once FSD is available, you won't even need to platoon with any drivers. But those would greatly increase the profitability. The payback period is short, particularly with those rebates, but also by lowering the operating costs so much versus a comparable diesel tractor.
But I would agree that, the Kenworth and the Peterbilt electrics only have a range of 150 miles because there's so much short haul that for them it makes sense, and it was easier to get that product into production than wait for a perfection and never get a product out.
Yeah, and as James said before, just getting something out there is more important than kicking the can down the road. I talked to people, I don't know if you guys have heard the story about the pottery teacher who was teaching his class how to make some pots, and did a little group example and said, this group I'm going to have you guys build the perfect pot, and this group I guess just want you guys to build as many pots as possible. And so the group who was trying to build the perfect pot the entire semester going along, trying to decide what is the perfect pot, couldn't figure it out. By the end of the class, they just made a pile of mush and they got nothing. Meanwhile, the other group that was making as many pots as possible eventually did make the perfect pot. The first few weren't great, but eventually they made the perfect pot, and they had a system to build them all. That's Tesla's model.
So it has been brought to my attention that after we discussed how we come up with our production numbers, I did not bring up my method. I cover it.
Yours.
I cover it on my channel quite a bit. But so Shanghai is easy. You get to cheat with that because you've got the first 2 months already handed to you on a silver platter, and then to determine whether production went up or down in the third month, I look at the rumors, but I generally completely discard them, and I look at what percentage of the outdoor superchargers are in use in various drone footage during the month compared to previous months, and then I also count the percentage of the loading lot that's full at any given time, and finally I go and I count the the cooling towers to see how many of the fans are in motion throughout the entire quarter. And if the cooling fans are not in motion, the plant is not at capacity, and that gets me real close on Shanghai. Yeah.
Brian's smoke signal methods work great. I love it.
And then Berlin, I kind of ballpark it. And then Texas, I kind of ballpark it. And then Fremont, I do counting again. I haven't come up with any good, deep silliness for Berlin and Texas yet. But I'm sure it's there. I just have to crack it. And I think I mentioned this to you, James, that I got the idea from how Bloomberg can tell you exactly how much crude there is in West Texas. They have a sun-synchronous satellite provider who takes a photograph every day at the same, 3 p.m. or sometime when the shadows are long, and they can measure the height of each shadow to tell you how much oil is in every single one of those expandable storage tanks. So that's and I look at the targets and I say it's 1% over or 1.5% over, the previous whatever. So, and that got me real close on S and X, because on that I was looking at wait times for people who'd already placed deliveries, and I just knew that they had not fully ramped production yet, so it was just going to be an incremental improvement similar to the previous quarter. So that's what I do.
Hey, if the method works, I can't knock it. It's definitely working for you.
Yeah.
So now, when I'm looking at Berlin and Austin, obviously they're not ramping like Shanghai did. Shanghai ramps like the Amish were building barns in Family Guy. So, how long do you think it's going to take before the Berlin and Austin get to that speed?
So when Shanghai launched, they were using 90% non-local parts. A lot of them had been stockpiled from Fremont. They were just assembling, and they moved to localization over the following, 2 quarters, 3 quarters? So they had an advantage in that regard. Berlin had a disadvantage in that they were going to use batteries coming out of Giga Shanghai, and then Giga Shanghai closed. So that kicked them pretty hard. So how long is the ramp going to take? I think the ramps we're seeing are more of what we can expect in the future, because all the products have to come in, and there's no good way to cut corners. James, what do you think?
I'm still trying to process the counting cars in parking lots part of your formula. I have what I believe to be a very healthy skepticism of counting cars in parking lots, born out of seeing the Shorty Air Force of Tesla Q post photos of full parking lots and empty parking lots, both meaning that Tesla is doomed and going to go bankrupt.
They're both. Those are both correct, though. Tesla is doomed. We know that.
Yeah, you can interpret a full or an empty parking lot to mean anything you want. Well, now I lost the question.
The question is about the ramps, the effectiveness of the ramps in Berlin and Texas. What do you see coming?
Yeah, I think Tesla's going to get those ramps figured out. They have faced some headwinds. You're a lot better in the weeds on what those are than I am. I do follow what Troy Teslike has to say about where he thinks the production capacity is, because he's just following it so much more closely than I am. And he's got access to really good data that gets him to a more comprehensive, holistic understanding of where global production is. So I lean heavily on that resource because I got enough else going on.
I tell you, man, I'll make your list one of these days. He's still the gold standard, but
I subscribe to your Patreon as well, Brian.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. I don't subscribe to Troy's Patreon. I would consider it, but now I feel like I'd be making it weird. And by the way, Troy was invited to join us today, but he declined, and Rob was also invited, and I never hear back from Rob, so they were not excluded maliciously. So that's
they're busy. They got a lot going on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if Troy even does interviews. I've never seen him.
Yeah, I've only ever seen him on Twitter. I don't know if he does anything.
I don't know if he's real. He could be.
He is optimist.
Seeing video of him, but he sure does produce a lot of great data, and Rob does too as well.
Yeah.
If you're not watching Tesla Daily on YouTube every day, I don't know where you're getting your information.
That's one of the.
Yeah.
That's probably the only daily channel that I actually watch. And of course the only channel that I will drop everything to watch would be The Limiting Factor, because.
Sure.
And John wants to know, was Gordon Johnson invited?
That would actually be a good time.
That would actually be hilarious. I have reached out to him in the past, I think twice, and unfortunately I have not heard back. So, I should check my inbox. Nope, still nothing. So we'll patiently await that. Surely.
That is one of the great things. that's one of the great things about the community. There's so many people who have their own niches and experience and backgrounds that can dive into certain specific areas of Tesla. So it's like, I don't mind doing my own, for my own valuation model. I come up with my own way of doing it. But to be able to have, like guys like James and Troy and Tesla Karav out there doing their thing, it's like, I almost don't need to do it for myself because everybody else is so good at doing it themselves. Like, you just follow them.
Well, James's financial numbers are sufficiently good that I do not even attempt to wade into those waters because it's out of my wheelhouse, man. And we're all wrong, but I would be impressively wrong.
Well, if we had Gordon on with us today, the viewers would have heard a lot less what the three of us think, because Gordon really does like to spend a lot of time talking.
Steamrolling.
In my experience, I've seen a lot of interviews with him before, and he comes prepared. He has a list of things to say before he makes any appearance. And,
we did get a comment. You can't handle the Johnson. I would absolutely agree with that.
The technique he uses is called the Gish gallop. It's a term from debate named after somebody who was very good at throwing out dozens of questionable points very rapidly, so that their opponent in the debate could not possibly address them all, right? So it doesn't matter how many of those statements were true. What matters is that the audience won't be able to hear responses to even half of them, right? So they'll walk away thinking half those points were unchallenged, so they must have been true. That's one way to do it. You should be suspicious of debaters who use that tactic, though. If you hear somebody rattling off lots and lots of sound bites that seem very qualified, right? So Gordon specializes in saying they have no growth in this market in this time period versus this other time period, and if you go look at either of those dimensions, you'll find that he cherry-picked both of those, the return and the base time period, and then he snuck them in to make it a true statement, but it's misleading in total because the trend is the opposite of what he described.
But have you ever looked at he doesn't always give quarterly numbers, not publicly anyway, but when he does, have you seen how accurate they are? They're very accurate.
He likes to raise his deliveries and earnings estimates right before earnings come out, so as to help Tesla miss them.
Gordon Johnson, he's probably got the most bullish numbers of anyone I've ever seen for Tesla.
Because it's a busted growth story.
Exactly.
And the guy's crazy.
He would rather say that they missed his expectations, and in order to be able to say that, he needs to set his expectations high.
Well, and that's the thing. I was talking with Tim before we went on. The problem is of course the stock is down. Tesla missed analyst forecasts. No, the analyst got it wrong. Don't put it on me. I didn't do anything.
Tesla still has some record numbers. Like this was a record miss. How do you have a record miss?
It's an all-time high for any quarter ever for deliveries. It'll be an all-time high for revenue. It'll be an all-time high for gross margin, possibly for earnings. We'll see how that goes.
Down 40%.
A couple of headwinds.
Yeah, I know, James, because the way you break it down with your production is, I don't dive into all the models as well as you do, so that obviously for you is going to give you a much more accurate average selling price, which is then in turn going to give you, a closer number for margins and EPS. So when you figured it all out, I don't know if you're willing to share it now, what's your EPS looking like for Q3?
I'm still working on Q3 right now. I was hoping to be done by the time this interview started, and I still have some more work to do. So there are, the production and delivery tie-out was pretty easy. The leasing tie-out was pretty easy. I did have to take the ending inventory counts up some. I made notes as I went. So there are other revenue impacts on FSD wide rollout in North America. So Tesla is going to be able to flow through some previously deferred revenue. So maybe that's a $0.1 to $0.2 billion to the good upside.
Do you think the gross margin will be an all-time high?
Let me see where we are at this moment.
See, I'm just impressed because I'm still working on my Q2 estimates. While you're looking for that, who do we think is paying Gordon Johnson?
I know he has family in GM.
I'd seen that. I had not seen a confirmation that that was actually true.
I'm not sure it is.
I think it was his not currently. I think it was his father was a higher level executive for GM in the past. I think that was what I had heard. Again, I don't have confirmation
before, and I don't think you're going to find confirmation on it that's accurate. I don't think that's true.
And even if he was, that's a former executive is pretty detached. Is there no obligation for these people to disclose their financial interests?
Honestly, I think when it comes to Gordon, I think he just needs to keep himself relevant, and being as outlandish as he is, by doing what he's doing, he keeps himself in the spotlight. That's my take on it.
I'm not going to speculate on Gordon's motivations, but he will always have a fond place in my heart. The first reply I ever got from Elon Musk was after pointing out that CNBC had invited Gordon Johnson on, and he was sharing his hot takes on Tesla, which at the time were that the company was going to go bankrupt.
Oh, did it?
Without disclosing that, he had less than a 1-star rating on tip ranks.
He's in the bottom.
Not really letting their viewers know.
He's in the bottom fraction of a percent. He is not done well, but he still makes headlines. And I just love that.
Quite a few.
Yeah, I love
that.
When
I was trading with penny stocks over on tip ranks, I was doing better than he was.
Goldfish can predict the crypto winners better than the crypto experts. And there's a comparable level of intelligence, perhaps. He loves to be crazy, and I just love that he named his company after himself. Clearly, GLJ is his initials, but I mean that's just that's insane. So, James, what'd you find on your inside scoop?
But by a razor-thin margin, I have automotive gross margin improving slightly over what got reported in Q2. We should see better numbers in future quarters. An all-time record high by a little bit versus what we saw in Q2 for automotive gross margin and for total gross margin.
And when are you guys looking to start counting some big numbers on stationary storage?
I've just started tracking it myself. That's the big thing I'm going to start diving into, because I know there's not a lot of people out there right now tracking a lot of that. I'm hoping that in the future we'll get to see a breakdown for power walls and mega packs like we do for production and delivery numbers. That would be great. I don't know whether they're actually going to do it or not. So I'm trying to track all of those numbers. Based upon the information we had gotten back at the beginning of September, I'm forecasting energy to grow almost 100% this quarter. They were at about 800 million last quarter. Judging by these numbers, if they were numbers from the beginning of the quarter for production and deliveries, could potentially hit 1.5 billion revenue for energy.
James?
I'm expecting pretty big growth from Megapack and a little growth elsewhere in the energy division from solar roof. So I do have revenue going up, and for the energy division to remain profitable, which is really all we can hope for. Tesla's reported so many quarters in the past where the energy division was not gross margin positive. So if I see more revenue than cost of sales out of energy, I'm satisfied.
And they did say that they were hitting record profitability this quarter so far. So obviously, going from zero, anything positive is record, but still, again, positive is positive.
Well, and we've got the Megapack factory operational. We've got a statement and a reiteration that they are no longer cell constrained, including for storage. All of that is a tailwind for stationary storage. And we've seen a lot of announcements of various either VPPs or Megapack installations around the world.
Yeah, Hawaii just took all of theirs. They're no longer, they took their last shipment of coal and they're taking in their shipments of Megapacks. I've got many subscribers from over there. The state of Hawaii is thrilled to be able to do this. I guess Kauai is already up and running right now. So they're thrilled to have this over there, and now they just need more charging stations. So Elon, if you're watching this, Hawaii needs charging stations.
Yeah, there's a particular commenter who loves to give me a hard time and say, well, Hawaii's only got, I don't remember, the Big Island, because you got to focus on the Big Island, has what,
Yeah.
like no superchargers, I think. There's like 1 or 2 destination chargers, but you can drive all the way around if you charge at home. I get that, but if you can't have a Turo fleet without superchargers, and it would just be nicer to have.
And you got a lot of people living in Hawaii who don't have a house with a garage, right? So maybe they don't have a place to charge at home, or they're living in a condo or an apartment where there isn't a charger, so they would need some place they can go to recharge. It would be nice to have some superchargers and, get some revenue in for Tesla on those,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah, and the Big Island is tough too, because when I was out there, like if you catch the wrong time and all of a sudden a lava flow comes through, you can't go one way, you've got to turn around and back up. So to have a charger somewhere would be convenient to have just for safety's sake.
That wasn't on my list of considerations, but now that you mention it. So we're coming up on an hour. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. I do have some closing questions. What are you thinking for production for the next 2 years? Moving forward. Tim, you go first.
Let's see, I just updated my spreadsheet. I've got, for next year, I have 2.3 million. That is assuming the Cybertruck does start ramping in Q2 of next year. Let me see if I could find my 2024 number.
Ambitious.
And honestly, like I like to go, I shoot a little bit high, but knowing full well that 50% growth is still going to be 2.1 million, and I'm totally on board with 2.1 million. So, but I will shoot high.
2.3 million in my model for 2023.
2.3.
And I have that growing to 3.0 in 2024. Don't hold me to those. I'm not done making my forecast yet, so I may find some reason to not like those numbers later, but that's what I have in there at this moment.
If you're both at 2.3, I'm at 2.29.
Yep, so I've got 2.3 and then 3.3 for 2024, and I update it every single week anyway, because we get new information all the time, so I'm constantly updating it and tweaking it. I mean, heck, I started this year with a very bullish outlook of 1.6 to 1.8 million, and look at where we're at now. You never know what's going to happen. So I'm constantly tweaking it, and if you don't tweak and pay attention to the numbers over a course of time, then you're not doing yourself a good due diligence and justice.
All right.
You were adjusting it in the right direction based on what happened this year with the Shanghai lockdowns. You should have been lowering your forecast.
Exactly.
Raise it.
When you get numbers coming out that say, by the way, the factory's not producing anything, you kind of have to bring it down.
I've been going to the GoJo School of Prognostication. Raise that estimate.
Well, and, I mean, think about it historically. Every single time we've had numbers come out, Tesla has smashed them all. But I think because there's so many people out there, like the Troy Teslics of the world, who have now come in with such accurate numbers, analysts are all following Troy's numbers, and they're following all of these other analysts' numbers that are in the Tesla community. So the accuracy now is a lot closer than it used to be. So these surprises are kind of going away. Obviously, the headwinds aren't helping that at all. But I think the accuracy is getting a little bit better just because of that.
And I wonder how many of them adjust their numbers over time based on people like Troy and us, who are better than them.
I'll say, as Gary Black said, a lot of these analysts look to the last 2 weeks of the quarter. That's when they make their changes. So they're not looking on a weekly basis. They go to the last 2 weeks of the quarter and say, all right, where are we at right now? What's everybody talking about? What are we looking like? And they throw their numbers out there.
And I guess my real question would be, why do they care what these numbers are? Is there value in it?
I'm not sure they care much at all. I think they check the boxes, they complete their template, they fill in the boxes, they go to lunch, take a long lunch, and don't come back. Right?
I would like that job.
Of a lot of Wall Street analysts. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, they have a valuation model where they say, all right, well, based on this number of deliveries, the average selling price, margin should be this. This is what revenues will be like. So when they got the numbers coming in for deliveries, whoop, they just changed the numbers. This is our new number for deliveries, and that adjusts their entire valuation model, and done.
All right. So I would like to thank my guest today, Oracle Tim, whom you can find on Twitter at OracleTim1. Did I get it right?
Yes, sir.
And James Stephenson at I cannot underscore enough, the author of the Stephenson Indicator, the world famous. I looked at it today. It is taking a little bit of a beating, but still.
It is the largest ever discount to Stephenson Indicator as of yesterday's close of trading. $158 discount to Stephenson Indicators. That's the largest variance in either direction that's ever happened. Not trading advice, for entertainment purposes only. Do your own research. Technical analysis is phrenology, etc.
Technical analysis is phrenology, and I got some bumps on my head after this week, that's for sure. All right, well, thank you guys. In the comments, if you're watching this later, what did we miss? What do we misunderstand? Leave it all below in them comments, and stay tuned, stay juicy, and I can't wait to hear from you clever robots next time, I guess.